On a Wednesday edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull, we talk about getting out of your fears. We talk about clearing up my throat. Don't live in your fears when it comes to baseball trades, when it comes to basketball trades, when it comes to Deshaun Watson and all the paranoia about playing Baker Mayfield in the first game of the season. Don't live in your fears. It's really that simple. You can't be scared. Don't worry about jinxes and bad karma and bad luck. It's all nonsense. And that's what I got to talk about on today's Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
Podcast is not for the faint of heart.
And I do think it's time for the Browns to move on.
It's not for those who ride the fence.
He's proven nothing.
But if you're looking for someone who tells it like it is about Cleveland sports,
everybody does fandom their way.
You've come to the right place.
I don't think he's any good.
It's time for the Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
All right, yeah, I get it. We're all kind of sick of waiting. We want to know what's going to happen. We're scared. We're nervous. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be 8 games. I don't know if it's going to be 10 games. I don't know if it's going to be 100 games. I don't know what's going to happen. Couple of things here. Everybody, too many people live in their fears. And that's not just people in Cleveland. It's just people in general. I've lived in my fears in the past. We all live in our fears to some degree. You fear a lot of things. We don't talk about it. We keep it private, but there's things in our lives that we're scared about. And so it paralyzes us. It makes us afraid to make decisions. It makes us afraid for our team to make decisions. But you can't live in your fears. You can't make decisions in life worried about what if it goes wrong, instead of thinking about what if it goes right and then dealing with the consequences if it doesn't. I'm not going to sit and be paranoid about, my team trades a prospect and he's good, blah, blah, blah. Let's go to my team, right? The Cubs, okay? Years ago, they traded Aroldis Chapman. They traded Gleyber Torres for Aroldis Chapman, right? Torres is, top prospect, and Chapman, even though he was a bit of a disaster against the Indians in the World Series, is a big part of the reason why they won the World Series. And I don't mean to pour salt in the wounds. I don't bring it up for that reason. It's just like, prospect, as Casey Stern, formerly of MLB Radio, said, prospects are cool, parades are cooler. That's a great line by him. I loved it at the time, and I stand by it now. It is a great quote because it's so true. We are all obsessed with prospects. Now what's happened? Gleyber Torres, nice player for the Yankees. He's not the superstar that everybody thought he'd be, at least not at this point. And it doesn't mean he couldn't have been. But even if he would have been the greatest player, and even if the Cubs hadn't won the World Series and the Indians had won, you got to take that chance. You got to go for it. And this is pertinent to what's going on with the Guardians right now. It's pertinent to what the Browns did this offseason. It's pertinent to what the Cavs might do this offseason or next when it comes to, being aggressive and trying to get LeBron back maybe or whatever, trying to get Donovan Mitchell now. I don't know. But let's start with the Browns aspect of this, okay? There's people that are scared. There's still many of you that are scared that the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson and that's going to turn into a disaster. And it might, right? It might. Maybe he gets suspended for a year. Maybe he's never the same player when he's on the field. There's all these, maybe he gets in further trouble. Maybe he's hurt. I don't know. You could go down this whole road of scary things that could happen that makes your franchise look like a joke. Instead of saying to yourself, okay, what was the situation here? Now, we had a quarterback in Baker Mayfield who was an okay player. He helped lead us to our first playoff win. That's great that happened. That's meaningful that it happened. It meant something to me as a fan because I hadn't seen the Browns win a playoff game in forever. But what's the goal? Right? You didn't become a fan to just watch the game and hope for the best. When you were a little kid, you weren't thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Kids don't think about that stuff until it happens, and then they cry, right? Because they're like, oh, well, I didn't expect that to happen, so now I'm upset. And that's how we should kind of all, to some degree, live our lives, especially when it comes to sports. We all, and I understand, as someone that has rooted for teams that have been bad for most of my life, I can relate. I get it. I've lived here 11 years. The Browns and Cavs and now Guardians, the now Guardians, I should say, have become part of my culture too, part of what I'm about. I mean, I want these teams to do well. I want to be able to talk about playoff games. I want to be I'll never forget the Cavs championship. None of you will ever forget the Cavs championship. We want more of that. And we want it from the other teams too, or the Cavs again, but not all. We want it from all. You want them all to win a championship. And so when these teams make moves that are aggressive, and sometimes people think overly aggressive, you can't think about it that way. I think it's the fear of that it's gone wrong in the past. For example, I was doing an interview with Fox Sports Radio with Rob Parker and Chris Broussard a few weeks ago. And they said to me, one of the guys was like, well, why move on from Baker Mayfield? He won their first playoff game in forever. And I brought up other quarterbacks, as I have before, and said, including Tim Tebow, and said, well, he won a playoff game. Why did the Broncos move on? And the response was, well, the Broncos have a history of winning, so Tim Tebow obviously wasn't good enough, so they moved on, which is true. But why would a history of winning affect whether you try to upgrade from your quarterback or not? And I think there's a lot of people that feel that same way nationally and even locally. It's like, well, don't rock the boat. I don't want to mess. The team's playing well. Let's not mess with it. And that doesn't make any sense. If anything, it should be the opposite. The fact that the Broncos have had success, the fact that the Broncos have won Super Bowls, if anything, should lead them to be more patient than a Browns team that hasn't won squat. The goal is not to end a playoff drought. The goal is to win enough playoff games at a Super Bowl that we're never talking about a playoff drought in Cleveland again. That's the goal. The goal's not to be good enough. The goal's not to be in the mix. The goal is to win it all, isn't it? Isn't that what it's all about? Isn't that why we watch these games and listen to these games and why you listen to me and others, why we talk about sports all the time? This is our obsession. No city in America is more obsessed with sports than Cleveland, Ohio. I truly believe that. There is more. I would bet anything that there are a higher percentage of people we'll just say in the Cleveland area, right? The general vicinity of Cleveland, not just the city itself, obviously. I would bet that there's a higher percentage of people in this area, in Northeast Ohio, that have at least some interest in the three professional sports teams, three major league sports teams, than in any other large metropolitan area in America. I would bet that. Because everybody wants it so bad. And you've been burned so many times that there's a tendency from a lot of fans to think, don't rock the boat. We're pretty good. We don't need to. That's okay. We've been so bad for so long. I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to take a chance. I don't want to get more aggressive. And then there's always, now I guess I understand with the Watson thing, it's a little more nuanced because it's not just about on the field. I get that. I do. I understand there's people that don't like the Watson trade because of the off the field accusations. And remember, again, at this point, that's all they are accusations. So I understand that. And that, I don't think that's living in your fears. I think I understand that angle of it. But ultimately, that's an excuse for some people. Because there are a percentage of our fans here in Cleveland that even from a football standpoint, don't think the Browns should have done this. And that is mind-blowing. It really is. When you can make a significant upgrade at the most important position in your sport, you do it. It's that simple. And it's why I've said for weeks the Browns had to make this move, had to take the risk and the chance of the issue off the field. Issues. They had no choice because they want to win. And that's what and we've been critical of Browns ownership, and I'm still critical. Jimmy Haslam's been a terrible owner. In terms of management, I like what Andrew Berry's done so far, but the jury's still out. It's too early. But what do we want? Don't we want our owners, don't we want our executives to want to win as much as we do? Doesn't it feel like a lot of times that the fans care more than ownership? And it's something we don't talk about, but you all feel it, right? You feel like they only care about the bottom line. We care about winning. Well, for all the criticism, and I've raked the Haslams over the coals a million times, especially Jimmy, deservedly so, for one bonehead move he's made after the next, for the criminal investigation from the FBI, and on and on and on. He's been a total zero as an owner. But the one thing I'll say in his favor is that clearly this guy wants to win because he took whatever PR hit there was and still will be. He said, and he liked Baker. Baker was his guy. He said, we're not good enough at the most important position. When I look around the landscape of the AFC and I see all these top-notch quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield is not good enough. And I've been harsh with Baker, over the top sometimes. Baker's not a scrub. He doesn't suck. He's a decent player. He's a starter in the NFL, but he's not a good enough starter. It's really that simple. It's clear as day. We've seen the body of work for 4 years. I can pick and choose the really bad parts, and you can pick and choose the really good parts. The reality is, in totality, his work is average. And that's what he is. And that's probably what he's always going to be. He has no elite talent. And that's the way it is. And Deshaun Watson does. The only question with Deshaun Watson is the intangibles. That's a big question. Can he get it done when it matters? Can he lead when it matters? We don't know that. We don't have answers to that for Baker either. So far, we haven't seen that. But we know he's an elite athlete. He's an elite thrower. He's accurate as hell. He doesn't turn the ball over. These things are all things that Baker doesn't have. Baker's not accurate. He turns the ball over. He's not a great athlete like Deshaun. I mean, it's really that simple. The guy is a significant upgrade at the position. So the Browns did not live in their fears. They did not get scared by members of the media who wrote all these scathing articles about Deshaun Watson. And that's fine that they did it. Although I did see this yesterday, which is really funny. And shout out to Joy, who's one of my favorite Twitter followers. She pointed this out. I hadn't seen this, but let me bring this up because this is just this is such a great point to just a silly comment. Now, of course, I can't find the tweet. Here we go. All right, so Peter King retweets. Oh, it's interesting. Wow. The tweet's been deleted. Interesting. So there was a tweet from, somebody screenshotted it. Good. So Michael Barbaro of the New York Times writes about Jenny Vrentas of SI, who's been covering the Deshaun Watson situation. And in his headlines, he writes, I spoke with my colleague Jenny Vrentas about how the NFL's biggest star has become its biggest scandal. And Joy, who's a big Browns fan, very smart person on Twitter, responded to Peter King retweeting that and said, he's far from the NFL's biggest star. And if these accusations are the NFL's biggest scandal, it's an indictment on how reporters have covered other scandals. Part of truth-telling is being accurate in depictions, not using sensationalism. I think we at the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show used sensationalism yesterday when we said that Anthony Schwartz ripped Baker. I don't know that we purposely did it that way. Mike, our producer, thought it was a rip. I didn't really take it as a rip. To me, it was sensationalism. Joy goes on to say, bigger. Joy's getting a lot of time today. Bigger than Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Odell Beckham. Bigger star? No, he's not bigger star than any of those people. Patrick Mahomes, J.J. Watt, Gronk, bigger than years and years of suppression of devastating data on head injuries, child abuse, domestic abuse, actual felony criminal convictions, systematic narcotics abuse, workplace harassment. I would add systematic racism in the NFL. It's hardly the biggest scandal, and he's hardly the biggest star. And Joy is 100% right. And Joy's just a smart person on Twitter. She's not a member of the media, but she's 100% right. That, anyway, I just thought that was really interesting, especially when a lot of these same reporters were giving Ben Roethlisberger a hero's welcome out the door, or a hero's farewell out the door. All right, folks, let me talk to you right now. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about how we're living in our fears when it comes to the Guardians as well. But first, I want to talk about Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Delicious, indulgent cookie dough. How about that? Covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories and have a whopping 15 grams of protein. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and your family. It's the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just order them for yourself. Unfortunately, I know that the history of that. I've done that with some food. I can't lie. Go to Built.com, BUILT.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15. All right. I'm back. We're talking about living in our fears. And another example of this is when it comes to the Guardians. So the Guardians now have one of the best minor league systems, according to, listen, you never know, because people that project prospects can get it wrong. Certainly, even the people that draft them get it wrong. But according to most people in the know, the Guardians have one of the best farm systems in all of baseball. And when you look at some of their top prospects, they have a lot of infield prospects, right? Bunch of guys. You've heard all the names. And then they've got a couple of young pitchers in Daniel Espino and Gavin Williams, who are highly touted. A couple of years away, George Valera is an outfield prospect, on and on and on. They just called up Nolan Jones a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of good, high-level talent in the Guardian system. And we get excited about prospects, right? And the Guardians already have some of their prospects in the big leagues. We talked about Nolan Jones. That James Karinchak is back up and finally pitching well for the first time in a year. We know Stephen Kwan's had success here. Oscar Gonzalez, who's hurt right now. And the list goes on and on. And, the Guardians have had a hard time developing hitters out of their system. And right now they have a lot of good young hitters. Will they all pan out? Probably not. Will some pan out? Probably yes. Who knows? But Espino, Valera, Williams, Arias, Rockio, Freeman, Nolan Jones, these guys, except for Nolan Jones, have never played in the big leagues. So we have no idea what they're going to be. Even Nolan Jones, we have no idea. He's played a little in the big leagues. It's too early to tell. Prospects are great. It's good to have a good farm system. But you got to think of them as assets. First of all, there's a thing called the 40-man roster in Major League Baseball. And at the end of every season, teams usually fill their 40-man roster. Some teams don't go all the way to 40, but most teams do. And once a guy you can only protect a certain amount of players. Once a guy's in the minor leagues for a certain amount of years, he has to be protected. And most of these key prospects for the Guardians at this point now have to be protected. The ones that aren't already will need to be this offseason. And if you have more guys that you think should be protected, and then you have 40-man roster spots, you have a problem. That's how you lose guys in what's called the Rule 5 draft, which happens around the winter meetings. And that's when you lose potentially good prospects for absolutely nothing. So not to mention, specifically to the Guardians, they have a ton of middle infield prospects. There's a glut. Not to mention the guys you already have, Jimenez and Rosario in the big leagues who are performing and doing well. So what to do? Well, the Guardians are in a position now where they probably have to trade some of their infield prospects. And that puts them in a position where even if they don't feel like they're a complete contender or a legitimate contender, that they're going to have to make some aggressive deals. The Guardians did win last night, ending their losing streak with a nice win over the Red Sox. They are 2.5 games out of first place as of this morning, July the 27th. 2.5 back of Minnesota, a half game ahead of the White Sox in the American League Central. They're also 2.5 games behind the Rays for the third wild card, 3 games behind the Mariners, and 5 games behind the Blue Jays for the other wild cards. The Guardians are very much in the mix. The trade deadline is 6 days and 7 hours and change away, okay? The Guardians are going to have to make a decision. So far, the trade deadline's been fairly quiet. I think we're going to see a lot of action over this weekend into Monday and Tuesday before the 6 p.m. deadline next week. The Guardians, a lot of times at this time of year, we ask, should you be a buyer or a seller? And in my mind, there's no doubt about it. The Guardians should definitely be a buyer. They could potentially be both. You're not just going to sell. They're in the mix. They're in the mix in the division. The division's winnable. Nobody in the division's that good. You've got to stay in the mix. Now, that doesn't mean they might not sell as well. I could see a scenario where they make some aggressive trades to get better and at the same time trade away Shane Bieber or Zach Plesac or another asset that they don't think they're going to be able to keep around long term. And that may frustrate you. It frustrates me, but that's how they operate. And to be fair, even though it's frustrating, it has mostly worked doing it that way. They were buying when they traded Clevenger. They were buying when they traded Bauer. How are those guys doing these days? Don't live in your fears. Yes, one of the prospects the Guardians might trade could turn out to be the next superstar. But think about all the Ajita fans have had in the past for high prospects, top prospects that have not panned out. The Guardians traded Bradley Zimmer. He's a fourth outfielder with Toronto. They didn't trade him. I can't remember now if they traded him or if they claimed him off waivers. Doesn't matter. He's done nothing. People were worked up about Clint Frazier. He's in the minor leagues right now with the Cubs. People were worked up. Remember Francisco Mejia, how big a prospect he was? He's a part-time player with Tampa Bay. Hasn't really done much. We could go back to pitchers they traded in the past, that young players. Most of the young players the Guardians have traded away in recent years, even going back to the Ubaldo trade and some of those other trades they made, those guys have not panned out in the big leagues. Not at all. And so they've been smart. And so you could trust it. Now, doesn't mean that's not going to, just because they've gotten it, they've traded prospects that haven't panned out other places, doesn't mean that will continue to happen. But I think this front office, you can be as critical of ownership as you want, deservedly so. I've ripped ownership at them many times for their lack of spending. But this front office, led by Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff, have proven time and time again that usually when they make a trade, they get the better end of it. So if they're going to trade away any of their top prospects, whether it's for a massive blockbuster for Juan Soto, which I doubt, but you never know, a smaller big deal for an outfielder, how about maybe Ian Happ of the Cubs? You could make a blockbuster deal with the Cubs. The Guardians and Cubs are a good fit for a trade. The Cubs need some infield, more infield prospects. The Cubs have Ian Happ, who could help the Guardians. They have Wilson Contreras that could help the Guardians. They have their closer, David Robertson. Not that he'd be a closer for the Guardians. He'd be a relief pitcher, but another good arm in the pen certainly couldn't hurt. I think the teams match up. You could even potentially get a starting pitcher, Wade Miley, who has been hurt most of this year, but he was great last year, and he's made 4 starts this year, and he's been good when he's pitched. I think he's in the injured list right now, but I think he's just about ready to come off. So who knows? I think there's a matchup there. We can't live in our fears. We talked about this, and we're going to talk about it at some point on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Who is the untouchable prospect? Yeah, there's guys I don't really want to trade. I'm not dying for the Guardians to trade Nolan Jones. I've been a big fan of his for a while. I've waited for him to come up. I'm excited that he's up. I'm not dying to trade Daniel Espino, who I think is their best pitching prospect in the system. He throws really hard. I like him. But ultimately, in the right deal for the right player, even if that's Juan Soto, I'm trading whatever it takes. And I know some people are like, well, how can you trade for Juan Soto? He's got 2.5 years left. He's never going to sign here. You're right. But if the Guardians think they can win a World Series in the next 2 years, I don't care. You give it a shot for the next 2 years, and then you trade Soto before his last season again, and you recoup the prospects. I have so much faith in the Guardians front office that I will not live in my fears of, oh my God, we traded all these prospects for this guy, and what if they don't win? What if the Browns don't win? You took a shot. You got to play the game. You got to have that chance. Now, in baseball, it's a little different. Deshaun Watson's going to make a much bigger impact on the Browns when he plays than Juan Soto would be for the Guardians. But Juan Soto could ultimately be the difference between the Guardians making a longer run in the playoffs or not. I know they're, clearly behind the Astros or Yankees, but what should they do? Just because those teams are better, should the Guardians not try to close the gap? Should they live in their fears and say, when's the time? When do we take the chance? When do we go for it? The Guardians could trade, again, I think Ian Happ, who's a really good player, but not Soto, is a more reasonable target for the Guardians. And they could trade, in a big trade with the Cubs, maybe 3 prospects. Well, you still have all these other prospects. You haven't given away the whole. People are like, oh, you gave away the farm. No, you didn't. You gave away part of the farm. And probably 1 or 2 of those guys will pan out, and that's it. Was it worth it to give yourself a better chance to win a World Series? I always think so. All right, take one more break and come back. Some final thoughts on continuing to live in your fears. Cavs edition. We've done the Browns and the Guardians. Don't be scared. I hope this has turned you around. I hope this has made you think about the positive, think about the upside, the joy of potentially winning versus the scariness of giving away a player you may not want to give up. But first, BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, the NBA, the NHL, combat sports, golf, even esports. Esports, for crying out loud. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. It is great. Find out for yourself. BetOnline, where the game starts. By this point, you know where I'm going when it comes to the Cavaliers. We were talking the other day on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show about potentially trading for Donovan Mitchell. Now, Donovan Mitchell's not a wing player. He's not exactly what they need, but he's a great player. And everybody I've talked to said he and Darius Garland could play together. Now, it's a smallish backcourt, but the Cavs need one more great player. And if they could get, the report, not report, but there was trade proposals that were kind of put out there. And it's probably not realistic, but the trade proposal I saw was the Cavs trading Sexton, Okoro, Abaji, and some draft picks. And I saw people say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I thought, what? Colin Sexton's a 6th man. They can't even figure out a contract. He's a one-dimensional player. Okoro, nice defender, doesn't bring much else to the table. Abaji's a rookie, and the draft picks, who knows what the hell they are. Donovan Mitchell is a proven all-star. He's an excellent player. And think about that. If you made that kind of trade, and again, I don't know how realistic it is. It probably isn't. But if you made that trade, you'd have Garland, Mitchell, and then, you go with the big 3 with the 3 big guys with Markkanen and Allen and Mobley, or maybe you start LeVert. I don't know, or LeVert. But even if you don't, let's say you start the 3 big guys with Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. It's a hell of a starting lineup with 4 potential all-stars. And then you have LeVert, Love, Rubio, and Jetty coming off the bench. That's a hell of a team that would give the Cavs a chance. Don't live in your fears. But Ojabi's a rookie, or I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. Okoro could get better. I like Colin Sexton. I don't want to wait. I've got 3 studs ready to rock. Get me that 4th stud in Donovan Mitchell, and let's go. Let's see if the Cavs can win it all. That's what it's all about. Browns, Cavs, Guardians. The goal is to win a championship. We're not out here to just have some drinks and have some fun. Let's freaking win. Let's get it done. Don't live in your fears. The executives for these 3 teams, the Browns have shown you they don't. The Guardians have shown you time and time they don't. Although the ownership messes with that sometimes. And Dan Gilbert, for all my criticism of him, showed you he's not afraid. Stay aggressive. Don't worry about what if it goes wrong. Think about what if it goes right. That's what it's all about. All right, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Adam the Bull. There you go. Check out my Cameo. I make videos for wedding engagements, birthdays, ripping your friend who stinks in fantasy football, whatever you want to do. Please subscribe to the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show YouTube channel. We are under 400 subscriptions away from 11,000. It is our goal to reach 11,000 subscriptions by the end of the month. There are 5 days left in this month. We got to reach that goal. So if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, and my podcast, The Bullpen with Adam the Bull, is under the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show YouTube channel umbrella, so please, I implore you to subscribe. Check out the Locked On Browns podcast as well with my buddy G. Bush and Jeff Lloyd. And today's Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, we got some huge guests today we're really excited about. More later in the day. I'll talk to you tomorrow, where else but right here in the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. Have a great day, everybody.